Okay.
Welcome to the KO Boxing Show. Haven't we got a massive show tonight? Australian Hall of Fame inductee, none other than the former IBF World Champion and an IBO World Champion, Lovemore Ndou. Welcome to the KO Boxing Show.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Great to have you on, Lovemore. Let's go over your 64 pro bout career. Let's go. Your first big fight on the world market was against Shambar Mitchell, and that was in February 2004. What can you remember about that fight?
The biggest thing I can remember is that it's a fight that I took on short notice. I recall Shambar was supposed to fight Costa Zoo for the IBF title, but then Costa suffered a shoulder injury, and they needed a last-minute opponent, and I took the fight. So it was on a week's notice. And I recall going into the fight, and I think Shambar and his team thought it would be just a walk in the park. But then I surprised him, and I shocked him. He couldn't handle my style. I think he just couldn't handle the fact that I could switch from orthodox to southpaw. And each time I switched to southpaw, I pretty much confused him. Look, at the end of the fight, I thought I won. I won the fight. A lot of people thought I won. In fact, I recall years later, after I won the same title, Shambar's former promoter, Gary Shaw, approached me. At the time he wanted to sign me, and he said to me, you know what, Lovemore, when you fought Shambar, at the time, had you been signed up with me, you would have walked away with the title. So, that tells you that, I pretty much won that fight.
Yeah. In May 2004, you fought the great Mikel Cotto, and that was on the semi-main event to Pacquiao Marquez #1 MGM Grand. What can you remember about that night?
Again, that was another fight I took on short notice. Again, in a week's notice. It was a great fight. Miguel Cotto went on to become a great fighter. So it wasn't, for me, losing against such a fighter is, I still feel, it was great on my part to fight a great fighter like that. In fact, I remember years later he was interviewed and asked, who his toughest opponent was, and he picked me. He said, I was his, the toughest guy he ever fought. So to me, that's an honor, coming from a guy like him. In fact, I recall, a day after the fight, I ran into the great, the former, the late Emmanuel Stewart.
Yeah.
And he said to me, Lovemore, you know what? For as long as you're based in Australia, they're going to keep bringing you out here in America as an opponent. So your only way to win fights will be, by knockout. And then he offered, he asked me, he made me an offer to come train with him. But I couldn't take the offer because, I had because of some personal issues, and I just couldn't forsake, living in Australia. And I was also starting to become a lawyer at the time. I just couldn't put that on hold. Today I pretty much wonder, what could have happened had I taken on that offer.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, Emmanuel Stewart was quite right. You look at it, you look at fighters like for example, Manny Pacquiao. He had to move to America to make it big. So it's not easy for a fighter coming from another country to go and make it big in America.
Yeah, good point, Lovemore. In February 2005, you fought Junior Witter for the Commonwealth title, and he was a guy that, he was a bogeyman. No one wanted to fight. What can you remember about that night?
Look, he was a very, very awkward fighter. He was a good fighter. Look, he beat me fair and square. I remember he actually even floored me with a left hook. But I got up, and I fought to the end, and I finished the fight. But I recall some of the judges saying, in fact, there were 2 knockdowns. Some of the judges saying at the end, had it not been for the 2 knockdowns, I probably would have won the fight. But look, he beat me fair and square.
Wow, yeah. In February 2007, it was the all kind of, you and Nafo Ben Rabat came here as immigrants, and you stalled fantastic careers, and it was for a vacant IBF world title, and it was in Sydney. And I remember the hype. It was just unbelievable hype. You won the fight, and you became your first time you won a world title. How did that feel for you on that night?
Look, it was an opportunity for both of us to become world champions. If you recall, Rabah had lost, the same title. He tried, he fought one Urango for the same
Uranga,
title,
yeah.
and I believe he was pretty much robbed. He should have won the fight.
Yes.
So, yeah, and I had already fought for the same title against Shambe Mitchell, so it was an opportunity for both of us to win the title. But, there was also a lot of talking going on coming from the Rabah camp going into the fight. And it did upset me with some of the comments, and I really wanted to knock him out, and it turned out to be a great fight. Rabah was very slick. He was one of the best fighters we ever had in Australia. So it went the distance. I stopped him, after 11 rounds, and I became the IBF world champion. And the fight went on to be voted the best fight in Australia that year.
Yeah, it was an awesome night and great for boxing. In May 2008, you fought Paulie Malignaggi for the second time. You lost a split decision for the IBF super lightweight title. What can you remember about fighting Malignaggi, who's one of the greats of boxing?
Look, this is where, again, politics play a part in boxing. I remember the first fight when I fought him, the referee was the late Eddie Curran. He wouldn't allow me to fight my fight. Every time I got in, he would push me back. And, I was pretty much fighting, Paul Malignaggi, the referee and the judges. And, they took the fight away from me. So, he beat me, but, only because they wouldn't allow me to fight my fight. The second fight, when I fought him in the UK, it was on the undercard of Ricky Herron. Now, going into the fight, Ricky Herron and Paulie Malignaggi had already signed, a deal to fight each other. So that pretty much meant that, for me to win, I had to knock Paul Malignaggi out.
Yeah.
But, I believe I beat Paulie the second fight, but again, for the politics, that was taken away from me.
Yeah, of course. Of course, in May 2009, you fought Frm Ndou for the IBO world title. What can you remember about that night?
Yeah, look, Frm Ndou, I remember, Philip, actually, when it comes to the Ndou surnames, Ndou in South Africa is just as common as Smith in Australia. So there's no relation between us. We just happen to share the same last name. But, I remember, when we were in the amateurs, I was his, team captain, and he showed a lot of respect then. But then, when I had to fight him, I felt, he was being a bit disrespectful. He called me a traitor, telling me, that, I'm no longer a Nelson Mandela person. I'm based in Australia, enjoying a good life with white people. I just felt some of the things, were unnecessary. But look, he did what he had to do to promote the fight, to sell the tickets. And at the end, I punished him. I beat him and won the IBO title.
Yeah, great effort. You fought in 2010, Saul Alvarez at the end of 2010 in December. That was in Mexico. You said previously that the Mexican fans really love you. Saul Alvarez was a great guy. What can you remember fighting someone like Saul Alvarez, who was a lot bigger than you? Let's be honest, he's fighting right up to light heavyweight now.
Oh, yeah, look, he was a lot bigger. I was coming in, I was a junior welter, so I was pretty much fighting a middleweight. But the money was good, and, the treatment I got, I had to be honest, I love Mexican people because, they love their boxing, they, and they treat you with respect. When I was there, they didn't look at me as an outsider, they, up until the night of, of the fight, of course.
Yeah.
Prior to that, they would, every time they would approach me, they would, they would wish me the best, they'll ask for autographs. So they gave me the best treatment, up until the night of the fight. Now, of course, they all were all, pro Canelo. But, I love the way, they treat the sport. Canelo himself, was a gentleman. I have to be honest, he treated me, he showed me a lot of respect, and I respect the guy for that.
In June 2011, you fought Cal Brook. What can you remember about that night?
Look, that was towards the end of my career, and, I shouldn't be fighting then. I should have just, given up boxing, I was already having problems with my left arm, from a previous injury that I had, which I talk about, in my book, but, I went the distance with him, he beat me on point,
Yeah. But you finished on a good note. In August 2012, you defeated the Superman, Gary Sinclair, for the WBF title. What did that night mean, finishing your last fight as a winner?
Look, I wanted to finish my career with a win, and when the opportunity came to fight Gary St. Clair, I took the opportunity, and Gary's so slick. He's one of the slickest fighters I've ever come across, and he was slick in there, but I beat him, and I won the WBF title, and then it was an opportunity for me to walk away from the sport.
Yeah, no, great way to finish. Also, before we finish off and go into your book, Tough Love, we always go into funny stories. And previously you mentioned being Floyd Mayweather's sparring partner in 2009. Let's go into some funny stories that you had with Floyd during sparring, because Floyd's pretty good with the tongue. He knows how to stir people up and get on top of situations. What did he try on you?
Look, that's Floyd. Going there, and sparring him. I was actually hired to spar him. And help him prepare for his fight. With Ricky Hatton. So I was his main sparring partner. But Floyd is always surrounded by a bunch of yes men. They just laugh at every stupid thing he says. And with Floyd, he will try and put you down when you're sparring with him. I recall, one day we were sparring, and then he started calling me Jumanji. And I just looked at him and said, no, you fool. Jumanji is not from Africa. You should try Shaka Zulu. And then on another occasion, we were sparring, and then he started calling me the B word, but I didn't appreciate it. So it so happened that when he was calling me the B head, I landed a right hand on his nose, and he started bleeding. So I turned around, and I looked at the crowd, and I said, any of you ladies here got a spare tampon, because this girl just got a period.
How did they cope with that? Did they laugh, or were they saying, "Oh"?
No, everybody started laughing. Floyd himself even laughed.
That's a great comeback, Lovemore. That is a great comeback. Let's go into.
I knew with him I had to use reverse psychology. So I had to apply some reverse psychology. But look, apart from that, he's a great guy. People often don't speak about the great work that he does, for the community. I had the opportunity to see it myself. It was during Thanksgiving, he would drive around and, give food and money, to the poor and needy. People often don't speak about this. They always talk about the bad things, but, he does a lot of good for the community. And apart from that, he treated me, apart from being Floyd during sparring, he treated me with respect. And I'm the kind of person that, I can only, judge people and treat people the way they treat me. And based on the treatment that he gave me and the respect that he showed me, I have a lot of respect for the guy, and I think he's a great guy.
No, awesome. Well, let's go into your life now after boxing. You're a successful lawyer. You practice well, you've got a great reputation with your law firm, but you're also an author. You've got the book Tough Love, and that was through your upbringing in Africa, all the tough times and all the tough things that you've seen. Touch us on your book, and when can we get the book, and how could the book come out?
Look, firstly, as a lawyer, I enjoy what I'm doing. It's always been, I've always wanted to fight for justice. Now I've got that opportunity to fight for justice. I do a lot of pro bono work as well for a lot of indigenous people. And for me, it's giving back to the community. In terms of my book, my book, was published in Australia, last year, just before Christmas. And it should be published, in other countries, including America and South Africa, sometimes in April or May this year. The plan was, to publish the book, launch the book worldwide, but then COVID-19, knocked everything back. It's a great book. It's the kind of book that, if you need some, some motivation, or you need, an inspirational story, this is the kind of book you gotta get. The book doesn't touch only on boxing. It touches on other issues, political issues, as well, politics in boxing, so it touches on some of the atrocities that that I had to face in South Africa, growing up, during apartheid South Africa. So it touches on a lot of things.
Yeah, before we sign off the interview, Lovemore, in that book Tough Love, I can't wait to get it myself and read it. I've heard a lot of great stories are in there, and it's straight from the heart, and it's the truth, and it's not filtered. So we're all looking forward to grabbing that book and having a read. You mentioned before the Cotto fight, you trained in the same gym as Manny Pacquiao, and you spent a week with Manny Pacquiao. What was it like watching him train and the vibe that he brought to the whole boxing community back then?
Remember at the time, Manny Pacquiao was just up and coming. It was before he became as big he was. But I saw something in Manny during that time. I saw the humbleness in him. He was humble back then. So it's not something new that is humble now. He's always been humble. And I appreciate that, and I respect that coming from a champion. So I had an opportunity to train with him, prior to, it was just a week prior, we were, to the fight, we were sharing the same gym. And he was a gentleman. And I respect the guy, and to see him today as a senator, I'm not surprised, having seen the way he handled himself, before he even became a super world champion. We need people like Manny Pacquiao in the sport. We need gentlemen like him, and also people like, for example, Costa Zoo, who was a great fighter, and I think Costa was also a gentleman outside the ring. So we need people like that who go, because, you look at boxing, boxing's got so many sad stories, and often people see boxers as buffets, and often a lot of boxers get themselves into trouble, and that doesn't help the sport. So, to have people like, Costa Zoo and, and Manny Pacquiao, it's a good thing for boxing. Even the Klitschko brothers.
And also Lovemore Ndou, now a successful lawyer, but also an ambassador for your people. And you're one of the first people that really connects to immigrating, because my parents immigrated. My father came from a different country. So you felt the racial stuff early when it was out there, and you stamped it. You weren't going to take any of that. And now, as a culture, we're growing and we're realizing, we're all living in one universe, and it's getting better, Lovemore, but it's people like you that's an ambassador, and you're a great person. You're not only a boxing world champion, now you're a lawyer. Keep up the great work you do for society, and thank you for your time, my friend.
Thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Lovemore. God bless.
Thank you.